What is Dark Souls if not death? A series notorious for difficulty and a narrative packed to the brim with grave themes that will have some players looking at the "you died" screen more than they actually play the game. If you've never played the Soulsborne series, look no further than Chammy's "This is what Dark Souls 3 is like" for a quick familiarization. Though, in the endless comparisons of other games to the series solely when they include any semblance of difficulty, it's easy to be left with a reductive view of the series and its use of death, a kind of hard for hardness sake. But the difficulty, failure, and focus on death which one finds in a FromSoft game is more than this. It is a constitutive piece of what makes a video game a work of art. Failure in games helps to demarcate them as an art form, a form filled with interactivity and engagement unlike any other. And even more so, death in the Soulsborne is not just a gameplay mechanic. With the narrative introduction of the Hollow and the process of hollowing, death takes on an essential story element, both in giving an in-game explanation for the mechanic of respawning, and going beyond the game to tell a story about us as players, even casting judgment on us, deeming us hollow if we fail to meet its mark. This going beyond at the confluence of gameplay and narrative is where the Soulsborne series enters the ludonarrative, and in doing so shows off a unique aesthetic experience only found in the video game. I want to explore all of this, from gameplay to story to player and all the artistic in between, as they are richly presented to us in the concepts of death and hollowing in Dark Souls. Plus, it's Halloween. As I look at death, failure, and hollowing in the Soulsborne franchise, I want to make use of a really insightful piece of writing, a philosophy PhD dissertation from one Zach Jurgensen, who wrote about the artistic merit of games in his paper titled "The Aesthetic Value of Video Games: An Analysis of Interactivity, Gameplay, and Player Performance." This piece highlights a lot of unique and important aspects of what makes games so artistically meaningful, a key element of which being the fact that they are games. One of the ways that Jurgensen details that video games can provide unique merit is how they can employ failure. Firstly, a game that is too easy is simply not engaging. Jurgensen notes that if a player is guaranteed success without the threat of failure, then engagement with the game turns into manipulation as opposed to interaction. He goes on to cite research which finds players enjoying games more when they occasionally fail as opposed to when failure is completely absent. For it to be a game, there has to be some chance you lose. If there isn't, then the developer risks the player becoming disengaged, and, according to Jurgensen, the potential for a unique aesthetic experience found through interactivity and immersion is lost. And in his next statement, much to the glee of die-hard, no easy mode allowed Souls fans, Jurgensen concludes, "Games that are too easy or require little attention to rules of skill fail to take full advantage of what sets video games apart from other artistic mediums: the potential for a highly immersive, interactive experience. Easy games negate the value of working within the video game medium." Now, even with these statements, there is plenty of room for people to argue about whether or not Soulsborne games still need to be as hard as they are, or if you like to be special, that they actually aren't that hard at all and definitely need to be harder. I'm not here to weigh in too much on the details either way, but I do want to say that the presence of this difficulty, this guarantee of failure, is to a large degree absolutely necessary. It becomes a vital component of the experience of the game. Failure is one of the variables that interactivity and engagement are most dependent on. To really experience what a video game is, this engagement, and thus this failure, must be there. And it must be there in the right manner. Pulling from another writer, Jesper Juhl, Jurgensen spends half of his discussion on failure describing how it has to be the right kind of failure caused by user action. Unsurprisingly, we find a good example of this right kind in Dark Souls, a series notorious, save for a few notable exceptions, for being fair with its deaths and causes of failure. If you die in Dark Souls, most of the time it's on you, whether that be for rushing in or not taking the time to note a relevant detail. While they certainly don't have a perfect track record, FromSoft games generally embody this right kind of failure pretty well, keeping the player engaged by having their failure determined by their own actions. When Jurgensen says that easy games negate the value of working within the medium, he is saying that ease completely fails to utilize one of the core aspects that demarcate games from other media. Easy games can, of course, still exist. Not every game has to flaunt how different it is from movies and books and the like. Plus, there are plenty of relatively chill games that might be thought of as easy, but still have a decent amount of failure. Stardew Valley comes to mind. However, in discussions of the medium of games and how it can grow and develop and deliver the artistic experiences that help make life worth living, the presence and mechanic of failure must be included. But, as I said, death in Dark Souls is not just a gameplay mechanic. It is also a prominent narrative theme permeating the game world and especially the differing game endings. And importantly, it's the path to becoming hollow. Hollowness in Dark Souls is essentially the destruction of the mind. In the in-game story, a curse has afflicted the land, preventing those who contract it from dying. Most of these undead eventually lose their minds and become hostile, zombie-like figures. They have gone hollow. Your character in Dark Souls 1, the Chosen Undead, is one of these undead who is to some degree hollow. Narratively, this explains and justifies why the player character can respawn after death. Instead of just accepting the logical inconsistency of dying and retrying to fight 2 seconds later, I say 2 seconds as if FromSoft would ever give us a boss run back that isn't at least a minute long, the game justifies why the failure of death is not permanent. The player character is undead, so if they fail a fight and die, they just come back to life to fight again. And while this exact kind of hollowing isn't nominally present in every game of the series, at least in the same ways, there is generally a similar ludonarrative theme throughout. In the original Dark Souls, after an in-game death, the player character gains the appearance of a hollow, a living set of skin and bones, and this hollowing also comes with some gameplay restrictions. But if the player continues to play the game, the player character does not quite go hollow, per se. Throughout the game and the rest of the series, we realize that going hollow happens chiefly with the loss of purpose, direction, or meaning. Crestfallen characters that lose hope and give up on living, admittedly undead living but living nonetheless, go hollow. But the player character doesn't, as long as the player keeps playing. And as the player keeps playing and dying, along comes another, more meta experience characteristic of Dark Souls: getting fed up with the game and its deaths and giving up, leaving the game before you complete or beat its narrative journey. I know this experience well, as it was me when I came across the first real boss of the game. I must have given up on Dark Souls 1 between 3 and 8 times when trying to best the Taurus Demon, the first boss after the tutorial. While there were some issues that I would classify now as the bad kind of failure referenced earlier, failure that did not have to do with my actions per se, or aspects of failure that did not feel like they fit the crime, boss runbacks, I died a lot, and I wanted to give up. And I did, many times. But I came back each time, sometimes after months, and eventually found out how to cheese the boss and got through it. In terminology familiar to the game and the community of fans, I almost went hollow. Not just my in-game avatar or character, but me, the player. When other players leave messages in the game world, or non-player characters speak to your character, and they say not to give up hope and not to go hollow, they may be directed first to the in-game character. But, as that character's controller, they then address you, the player. When a player gives up on the game without fighting to the end, and choosing that final fate to link the flame or let it go out, or something subsequent in the later games, they are leaving their character as one of the mindless drones to sit in the universe of the game forever, aimless and without purpose, hollow. In this connection of gameplay to story and metagameplay to story, 2 core elements of the video game are being fused. This is the ludonarrative, a term made popular by the concept of ludonarrative dissonance, but a more broad phenomenon that describes the interplay of gameplay, as ludus is the Latin word for game, and narrative within video games. Jurgensen discusses this concept of ludonarrative, albeit in different terms, as another core aspect of video game aesthetics. While Jurgensen uses the example of Braid, I think his discussion is just as applicable to Dark Souls. He says, with a bit of my own subject interjection to make the quote work, by connecting the mechanics of death, failure, and respawning with the story element of hollowing, Dark Souls successfully connects its gamehood with the narrative, taking full advantage of the interactivity video games offer. Doing so creates a cohesive object of aesthetic appreciation. where the artistic value of the narrative and gamehood are intimately intertwined. To me, this connection of gamehood and narrative to create a unique aesthetic experience is one of, if not the, core artistic merits of video games. It is a blend of aesthetic in a medium-specific way. No other kind of art could deliver an experience of the same kind. As such, to see it happen in Dark Souls, especially in tandem with another vital gaming experience, that of failure, is to witness and recognize a profound moment of artistic depth. With so much tied up into a single mechanic, so much player experience and narrative weight, which is able to reach out from the game and comment on, even judge, the player themselves, it is clear that a deeply artistic and aesthetically worthwhile experience resides here, at the confluence of death and Halloween in Dark Souls. I really wanted to get this video out on Halloween for the title pun, and I also really want to discuss the aspect of ludonarrative and the philosophy of games more, both how video games achieve unique artistic status and how they can relay traditional philosophical knowledge. Hopefully this is a good primer that you, my audience, will be receptive to, as it has been Dark Souls centric. I'm hoping to do a follow-up video that focuses on the ludonarrative more centrally and explores these concepts more explicitly. Well, those are my closing remarks, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Be sure to stick around if you want more of this kind of content. Thanks.